obviously get him back, sooner than later. But I think that this week coming up in terms of his rehab will be a critical week for him. He has, gotten better. He hasn't done anything really on the court, just been all treatment. But it's probably, I don't know. We'll maybe see towards the end of the week, maybe where he's at.
Thank you.
Yep.
Joe, I think I saw your hand next. You can go.
Yeah, a couple things, Billy. First of all, with the idea of what Memphis is going through and how many games they've canceled, and there's been numerous teams that have multiple cancels. Are you starting to see that this thing may play out where winning percentage may be the decider? And how fair is that? If a team does get 72 and you guys are all kind of glopped up and another team got 65 or 66 and they have a better winning percentage, but they're in your neighborhood, I mean, is that a competitive imbalance, or is this what you guys signed up for this year?
It's probably, Joe, what we signed up for. I know that, these games that are being postponed, I think the league is trying to find ways to reschedule. But I think if you even look at our schedule right now, coming out of, this week, going into February, I think we've got 17 games in 31 days. So I don't know where they reschedule some of these games. I think they'd like to try to do that to make it as fair as possible, to try to get, as close to 72 as you possibly can. But I mean, you make a really good point. You're going to have probably a little bit of a imbalanced, number of games, schedule, winning percentages, all those things. So it's kind of what everybody signed up for. I think the league will probably try to make it as fair as possible. Obviously there's playing games in those kind of situations, but I don't know if I've really have gotten any information, on what the plan is in terms of, like you mentioning, some of these teams missing so many games that they can't make them all up. And now you've got an imbalanced schedule. Okay, where does that leave the league at the end of the year in terms of, how they make it fair for everybody? I'm not really sure, what they do there. I do think that the feeling was when we got our Boston game canceled the first time was, the possibility of trying to find a date to make it up. And, I think we even, looked into the possibility, could we play Boston again, here, because Memphis is not playing, but they've obviously got games scheduled, so they couldn't do it. So I don't know how the league's going to figure out the scheduling to make up some of these games. And if they can't, I think what you're talking about is going to be interesting to see how it all plays out in the end.
The other thing I have too, I don't know if you saw, but the All-Star game was originally canceled. Now there's a push, for players and maybe the league to put it back on in March. I know coaches are kind of low men on the totem pole when it comes to the pay grade of this. But it would seem that the players want to have that weekend to entertain and do what they do. But as a coach, you want to make sure, guys, there's as little moving parts as possible so that there isn't a spread or isn't something that hurts the team, long term. I mean, what's your kind of feeling about that? Or is that kind of not in your zip code to answer?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably not in my zip code to answer. Obviously, the PA is going to work with the league on that. I think they're going to take all those things that you just talked about. How do they, if they do an all-star game, how do they keep it safe? How do they prevent a spread? There's no fans who actually can come in. How do they make sure that everybody's staying safe? People leaving market, coming back into market. I think the other thing, Joe, too, is, if there is not an all-star game and there's a week off or an 8-day period off, what's going to be the criteria? Because you could have the same situation. You could have players all around the league leaving their markets and going places and coming back and potentially bringing the virus back in. So, I haven't really had much of a conversation about, what that's going to look like. Obviously, I know for the league and for the players, the All-Star game is obviously it's a great weekend. It's a great moment, for the NBA and celebrating the players that make the team. And it's great. But, however they get to that and how they do the safety part of it, I think whether or not there's an all-star game or not, they're going to still have to deal with, if there is a break in the schedule, what is the protocol and what's in place in terms of, guys leaving or guys having family come in. And once you kind of leave, are we testing regularly? Do you have to test regularly? Or are we not testing it? Those are all things I'm not really quite sure what's going to happen.
Thanks, Billy.
Yep. Thank you.
Sam Smith, go ahead.
You've talked about fundamentals when teams are pressuring, moving the ball, moving yourself, moving your body, all those things. Is anything you worked on or talked about with the players as far as, beyond that, dealing with force? Because it seems like that's one principal issue the teams really had trouble with?
I'm sorry, Sam, trouble with what part of that?
The teams really had trouble with teams that apply, pressure, defensive
Yes.
pressure particularly. And other than moving the ball and passing, the fundamentals you've talked about, is there anything else that you've dealt with?
Yeah, I think screening becomes a major part of that as well. And then I think that like you're always in every possession, Sam, there's a point of contact, whether it's in pick and roll, whether it's in screening action, and who can win those kind of line of scrimmage, so to speak, plays. Generally, if you get bumped and you're knocked off of a cut, you're taken out of a cut, you're not cutting with force, then all of a sudden it makes it really difficult to move the basketball. So to your point, instead, besides taking care of it and not turning it over, you've got to win point of screen actions, and same thing on the defensive end of the floor. If guys are just coming off free off of screens and there's no resistance or physicality, and certainly you don't want to foul, but you've got to be in these situations where you have to try to blow things up, and get over top of screens, get back on the ball. And the same thing goes on offense. If you're getting hit or bumped and you're stopping your cut, generally it's going to stop movement. Obviously playing the Lakers and, Boston's obviously a big team as well, and they're physical, especially on the wings, and, playing Thompson and Tice together as well. They're a physical team, and so were the Lakers. And, I think the way you have to try to combat that is you've got to really move your body, and you've got to play through contact, and you've got to, really, if cuts are taken away, you've got to make a change of direction and make a different cut, but you got to do it with force.
I wouldn't say, to give up on anything, or not be who you are, but it seems like a lot of your roster players, and of course they're young, but also have succeeded based on the finesse, the way they play finesse-wise as opposed to physical-wise. Are those players capable of carrying out what you'd like to see them carry out?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Sam, because I think, that's part of their evolution and growth. We've got a lot of young guys that are going to physically get stronger. They're going to physically get better. But, really, there's not a lot of solutions, so to speak, when teams are physical or teams have great length. You have to be able to space. You've got to be able to move the ball, and you got to be able to move your body. And the minute the ball gets stagnant or it gets stopped against physicality, that's when the length and size comes in. And now, we're not the tallest or the biggest or the strongest team, in the league. That's when we can have a hard time trying to play over top of people. We had a hard time finishing around the basket against LA the other night, and we had a hard time. But now I thought, the first time we played them, we did a really, really nice job of generating and manufacturing good shots against that team. Now, Davis didn't play, and I know he's obviously a key component to it. But, yeah, that's something that we're going to have to battle and fight through. I definitely get your point, agree with your point to a large extent. But they're for their growth as young players, they're going to have to get to that point that they can be able to do that. And listen, in certain games, some teams and some players are stronger and more physical than others. I get that. And I don't think that we're going to go into games and saying, listen, we're the biggest and the strongest team out there and the most physical. But I think you've got to combat that by how well you cut, move, and screen.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, Billy, I think that's all we have for you pregame tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.